was a year ago, and a very, very wealthy couple up in the northeast of England had a very substantial amount of money, having sold their business. Quite traditional people, lived in a small community, had been approached by a number of other advisors, and they were all technically very well equipped. They knew their stuff. They worked for big companies, and the problem that the advisors, Tony, that had been to see this couple before I was introduced, had spent all of the time saying, what you need is this, what you need is this. Didn't spend any time really talking to the client about what it was they really wanted. And that was my first question. Before we sit down, before we fill in any paperwork or I gather any information, tell me, what do you want? And their attitude completely changed. And they said, we've seen someone from Coutts Bank, we've seen someone from Barclays Wealth, weren't impressed at all. And I picked up a piece of business last year that got me to TOT, and it was just in one case. By asking the simple question, tell me about you, tell me what you want, because it's never about the advisor. So it can be as simple as that. And nothing to do with product or price or my experience and very often, as you know, Tony, throughout your career, it's not about talent, because goodness knows I lack plenty of it. But sometimes it's just about putting the client first and letting them know that you care.
So you asked them what they wanted?
Yeah.
So am I on a small override?
Knock yourself out. Knock yourself out. What about you? Because you've got plenty of...
Well, funnily enough, I was always a numbers man. I would expect to write between 20 and 25 cases every month, and that's what you would do if you're seeing 15 people a week, every week. So yeah, there'll be some good size ones in there and some small ones, but nothing as big as the case that you've written. But the case, rather than the biggest case I ever did, because it's boring, the most important case I ever wrote was the planning I did for my own father. Because he died and left my mother as a widow, and amazingly, she lived for 30 years. And for 30 years, Sandro, she lived in her own home. The last 3 years when she needed care, there was money there to provide the care. The last few months when she needed residential care, then there was the funds there to pay for it. All because of what I'd learned here at MDRT. So certainly for me, the most significant case was the case on my own family, because that meant I didn't have to keep her. Right. But, thank you. It's very interesting, because I actually can remember my father's funeral, and this really brought home a lesson to me. This is what our business is really about. Because when we got back to the house after the funeral, my mother drew me aside and said, I only have 2 questions for you. Can I afford to stay in my home? Can I still afford to buy presents for my grandchildren? And for 30 years, she stayed in her home and always bought presents for her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren.